Endgame technique is essential for your chess growth. Garry Kasparov argues this is the most important thing you can invest your time to get better at chess. In this video, I'm gonna share with you a great number of practical endgame tips to make sure you walk away a stronger chess player. This game was insane. For the first time in my entire career, I got the bishop and knight against the king checkmate. I mean, this is so instructive. I dreamed about having it for my entire life because I know how to do it, but I never got it in real life. Well, today it happened. And beside that, I also made two brilliant moves in the process. My opponent made one brilliant move. So you're gonna learn so much out of this game. Let's get started. What's up, chess player, and welcome to the Journey to Grandmaster, the place where you can improve every single aspect of your chess game. Still in Munich, it's round number 2. I had such an amazing game. I mean, I haven't played pretty well in the opening. It was quite a new position, so I was as white, and even though my opponent had quite lower rating, he played extremely well. He got a very good position as black with this move b5, and even though I kind of guessed he's gonna play it, but here he chose the sideline, and then yeah, I wasn't really that well prepared for it. And then after a4 he chose another sideline, because normally you play b4 here as black and try to close the position, but he took instead on a4, and starting from this point I was completely on my own, out of book. And this is where, well, real chess game begins, and it's very difficult because this type of position is completely new for me. I roughly knew the plan, but yeah, let's see what went wrong for me here. So I took on a4 with the rook, which is not the best move here. c3 seems to be the best, but somehow I was afraid that he's gonna just play bishop to d7, and how am I supposed to get this pawn back? But the engine doesn't care about this pawn. It says, okay, you can get your pawn. I'm gonna just bring my knight to c4, and what do you do with your development? I mean, all of those pieces are very weirdly placed, and there is absolutely no fun in black's position. Unfortunately, I wasn't smart enough to understand that, so I just took the pawn because I thought, well, in the long run, this pawn should be a weakness, so my rook is active, no real problems, and I can still place my knight on c4. That's exactly what I decided to do. Castles, castles, knight to d2, and I'm ready to bring the knight. But somehow my opponent played knight b to d7, and I started to question my plan, because of course the normal move should be knight c4, this is where the knight belongs, but the problem is my opponent immediately plays knight b6, he wants to exchange this knight, and then the queen is active. I probably should play b3 just to make sure, well, there is no problems along this diagonal, everything is protected. But then bishop d7, the rook should step back, and then he plays bishop b5. And I somehow thought, well, there are no real problems for black here. He managed to develop all of the pieces, everything is fine for him. But I was wrong. I mean, the engine says it's quite a comfortable advantage here for white, roughly half of a pawn, and I should just play something like knight to d2, not even being afraid of compromising my pawn structure, because yeah, it turns out it's not a real problem. I can protect that b3 pawn, and then my knight would be far superior to this bishop. This is the way I should have been played, and then the game would have been normal, just knight c4, just no funny business. And this is my best advice for you. Just don't do those weird looking moves. If you have a clear plan, if you know where the pieces belong, just do that. But my opponent made all of the moves instantly, so I knew he was still in his preparation, so I thought, well, I need to figure something out to bring him out of the book, and so that we both play on our own. So I played the move queen to a1. Seemingly a useful move here, attacking the pawn on a6, but yeah, placing the queen along this diagonal, and yeah, in general, the queen in the corner is not the best piece. And it turns out my opponent gets quite a lot of compensation for this pawn. I mean, I can grab it, there is no way he can save it, but it's not really making me happy with this very weak pawn. For example, he played knight b6, which is a very nice move. I played rook a3 and just queen c7. He says, if you want to take the pawn, please take it, but I'm gonna get such a huge compensation. Either just... No, wait, taking here actually was okay for me, as I thought during the game, because after rook a8 I still have queen b5 and I'm kind of controlling everything. But what was the problem is that if he just plays the move bishop d7, he's ready to play f5. Now if I bring my bishop back, he has just the move rook a3, and you see the black is doing fantastic here. the compensation is more than enough. I mean, black is just much better. So this is just a bad line. And if I don't play a bishop d3 back, then I wasn't sure what to do, because f5 is still coming, then the bishop is going to be very strong, this rook is coming. It feels like a very improved version of a Bangkok gambit. So I didn't want to take the pawn, but then what the queen is doing on a1, if I don't want to take the pawn, it doesn't feel that logical. I played rook e1 just to finish my development, but somehow f5 still works. The tactical justification is, if I take, I mean, feels uncomfortable if you just take it back, that's no good news for you. And if you take on d5, I thought I have the move bishop to e4, and there are going to be problems. Yeah, bishop e7 is now possible. Okay, but that's at least fine for white. What is the real problem is the move c4, intermezzo move. Now the bishop is hanging, and the desirable square is of course e4, but unfortunately it just loses due to g takes f. And then the bishop has to go back, but then this bishop comes. I mean, this is a fantastic turn of event for black, it's, at least from visual perspective. I mean, those bishops are very, very strong. My pieces are going back, and I'm not achieving anything. So I decided, well, I need to stop that somehow, and I played the move knight to c4. The engine argues that the best move was here to take on a6. Yeah, I was also not a big fan of it, because in the best case scenario, I get some kind of an equal position where I don't really get any chances to play the position for a win, and of course I want to win the game. But the problem is, what I did end up being even worse for me. Instead of having an equal position, I have got a worse position. It's +1 here for black, even though it didn't seem that bad for me when I was playing the game, because I thought, well, at least all of my pieces are active now. And yes, he has a pair of bishops. You know, I'm a big fan of 2 bishops. It's just a huge strategical advantage. But I thought, well, I have still these targets to attack. I still have quite a solid pawn structure, so it shouldn't be that bad for me. But the agent says, no, bishop d7, and black is much, much better. Fortunately for me, my opponent played bishop to b7, and I knew immediately this is the wrong move. Why? Because now, after bishop c4, very good move, never play c4, because you make your bishop an idiot. The best move, and I knew that, for black is just to go back to c8, now having good prospects for the bishop, and I don't have any chances at all. b2 is going to be a weakness for the entire game afterwards, so c4 is no good. Imagine how cool it would be to play chess without ever having opening troubles again. What if I told you I could teach you all openings you will ever need in just 10 days? You get lifetime access to more than 110 pure value video tutorials, almost 100 practical tasks to apply your knowledge immediately into practice, 30 plus bonus videos to dive 10 times deeper, as well as private community where all questions you might ever have are answered daily. Get a $200 limited time discount with the link in the description, and forget about all opening pain once and for all. So I played bishop to c4, now the pawn is protected, the bishop is still attacking, putting pressure on this a6 pawn, and this bishop is stupid, it actually becomes a target, the queen constantly needs to protect it. So this was the moment when I felt, okay, maybe now I would have some chances. And I also get the control of the e-file. That was another good thing. And I decided to sacrifice a pawn here, because I figured you can't really take it. At least I thought so, because I get such a huge initiative. Yeah, rook e7 is basically winning, attacking the queen and the bishop behind the queen. Queen goes to c8, and then I play c3. Very important to block this bishop. And then I have so many active ideas. This knight is coming, I have so many attacking pieces, and my opponent has nothing to do. So that was justified. My opponent played bishop to f6. And yeah, I decided I need to somehow continue the attack. I thought about the move g4, but somehow it felt pretty scary to do that, even though for the moment seems like the king is pretty secure, but you know, it's really very double-edged. So I played queen to e3. That felt like an improving move. I have this f4 square, I have the h6 square. Bishop b2 is still bad, because I still can play c3 and block that bishop after rook to e7. So that was it. And here after king g7, yeah, probably I should have played g4. Now I'm more or less ready for it. g5 is coming. This is what I should have done. Instead, I unfortunately played the move b3. The engine says it's still excellent, but I don't like it because it gives my opponent a very clear plan. Like, this is important in chess, not just to play the best move according to the engine, but to make your opponent's life as difficult as possible. And when you give a clear target for your opponent, a clear plan what to do, then it's not really tough for him. So I played h4. Yeah, g4 seems to be still the best move here, but I just didn't see how I end up creating some really dangerous threats here. Yeah, it turns out this position is much better for black, so g5 is wrong. But I'm just playing g4 for the sake of playing g4 and then play queen d3 and try to hold everything together. This is very tough. I wanted to get something clear, so I played h4 because I thought, well, my plan is now very straightforward. But my opponent just stopped it with h5. That is a great move. And now I'm kind of stuck. Like, yes, I have 3 active pieces here, but what to do with it? I don't have any real plan. I played the move rook to f4, which is a mistake here, but I decided, well, I want to improve my rook's position, maybe getting ready for knight to g5 in some variations, although I have to be careful with it because it gives my opponent's bishop some squares. My opponent just goes forward with his plan, and that's very sad for me, that he's making the most straightforward moves like h5, a4, and all of those are great moves, so that's tough to fight against. Now he takes rook a4, and that's actually an accuracy. What is the right move? Queen takes a4. Okay, that's actually not that easy to understand, but maybe the rook still goes here to fight for the e-file, and the queen is active here, protecting the bishop potentially. Yeah, that actually makes sense when you start to think about it. But my opponent played rook takes a4. I also anticipated it. King to h2, I just wanted to make some fast improving moves, because at this point I was low on time, so it was important for me just improving my position step by step. My opponent played rook b4, I continued the same manner. I made an improving move g3, because now once my knight is going away, earlier, like if I played knight g5, there is always bishop e5, just pinning my rook and winning an exchange. But now after g3, knight g5, for example, becomes a valuable idea. My opponent plays queen to a4, which felt a little bit weird. I just couldn't understand what does he want from me. Like, yes, he is attacking the bishop, but I just step back. And what is the purpose of all of that? Do you just go back, or what do you do? He played queen to a3, probably with the idea just to make me exchange the rooks and then reduce the material and then continue exploiting my weaknesses. But here the moment comes. Pause the video for a second and find the brilliant move for white. Okay, I hope you managed to do that. That is rook takes f6. Yes, I'm sacrificing an exchange here, but the key point is, if you haven't found it yet, is to find the next move after king to f6, because without this move, this brilliant move worth nothing. Right, I hope you have found that as well. So the move is knight to g5. And it's not a check, which makes it more difficult, because normally when you do some combination, you expect the next move to be some kind of a check, or, I don't know, going forward with your queen. Knight g5 is actually a very strong move. It attacks the pawn on f7, and there is absolutely no way to protect it, because those pieces are so weirdly placed on the other side of the board. And that's actually very logical when you come back before this brilliant move in terms of how do you find such a move in your games. Well, you think, I have 3 attacking pieces here, and my opponent has just 1 defender for his king. When I eliminate that defender, then I have the queen and the knight against 1 king. And you know that the queen and the knight is a beautiful combination of pieces. So you feel that that means there should be something for you. But then it's important also to find that something. So I wasn't sure, I wasn't able to calculate till the end, but somehow I trusted my gut that there should be something when I have such a dominating position on this part of the board. If you just count this part and I have an extra queen and an extra knight, that should mean something, right? Those pieces are just stuck there. So I play knight g5. Now queen f3 is a huge threat, basically checkmate threat in a few moves. Like if you make, I don't know, any move, rook takes b3, let's say. I don't care about that. I just play queen to f4, you go back, I play knight to e6, and queen c7, checkmate. So you cannot do that. You cannot take on b3, you cannot play c4 or any other slow moves. Even bringing the queen back doesn't help, because you have no way to protect that f7 pawn, which is the key here. The only move, and my opponent unfortunately for me found it, another brilliant move, bishop takes d5, that is saving black. And when I played rook takes f6, I haven't missed it. I mean, if I would have seen the move bishop d5, I probably would never play rook takes f6 in the first place. And probably that's a good thing, because it ended up to end well for me. I didn't know that back in the time, and I was pretty upset because I considered that this endgame is not that great because of this move rook b2. Of course, another great move, pinning the pawn and basically winning it because I don't have any way to save it. But it turns out, objectively, there was a better way after this brilliant bishop d5 move for white to play. This is queen to c3 check. Feels incredibly counterintuitive. Why? Because the queen was protected, and now it's not. Now the bishop is just pinned, and the queen is in trouble there. But it turns out the king has no ways to go. I mean, the only square to go is e7, but now I have this queen e1 check, and I'm no longer on this third rank, and that means I'm free to take the bishop next move. And if you try to protect the king with the bishop to block the check, then I'm just taking it, and then the queen comes, and once again, the combination of the queen and the knight just destroys the king. So in this case, my opponent would need to play rook d4, the only move, and then I'm coming back to f3 with the knight, another amazing move, because I'm attacking this rook, you can take it, but then I take with the queen, and once again the king is in huge trouble. This position is pretty much winning for white. So my opponent needs to take on b3 instead, then I'm taking on d4, and we end up in this dead draw queen's endgame. King to f8, I take on b3, 4 against 4, nothing to play for. So I would say from a practical point of view, I made the right decision here instead of going for that. First of all, I didn't see it at all. And secondly, in terms of trying to play for a win, to take here on d5. The engine says it's a little bit better for black because of this move rook to b2, but it only works if you start to be active immediately and play the move c4. And my opponent didn't trust enough in himself to play c4 here. I was expecting it, I thought that might be dangerous, but okay, that's still roughly equal. My opponent played rook to c1 instead, I managed to grab a pawn, and in this moment I already felt pretty optimistic that, well, at least I'm the one playing for a win here. My opponent offered me a draw somewhere at this point, but I didn't really think about it, because why would I ever accept a draw if I can play for a win for the next 200 moves with two pieces, try to create a lot of tricks for my opponent, and that's exactly what happened. It ended up being a knight and bishop against king checkmate position. I mean, this is so amazing. Let's see what happened here. Rook to c7, bishop to e4, rook to a7. And yeah, here I was choosing between the plans. Of course, the desirable move is knight f4, just to attack the g6 pawn twice. But the problem is, black just plays g5. And then when I take on h5, which would be my dream otherwise, my opponent just plays king to e5, attacks my bishop, and then he exchanges that pawn, and that's just not enough material for me to win the game. So I thought my goal is to win the g6 pawn in the way that both of those pawns remain on the board. That's why I played the move bishop to c2 instead, but the problem is my opponent gets a lot of activity. He plays d5 now. Yes, I achieved my goal, I play knight f4, but it turns out he just plays d4, takes. Now, first of all, there are only 2 pawns left. This is already quite a bad sign for me. And secondly, my bishop is pinned, so I cannot take on g6. Well, I cannot take with the bishop because of the rules, and with the knight because he can just take here on c2 and then take on g6, and I'm not in time here. The king comes, and I'm just one tempo short. If I could have played king to g5 here, I would be winning. But unfortunately, he's just taken the pawn, and that's a draw. So instead of that, I played the move king to c1, and here is the key moment of the game. Because my opponent thought for such a long time, and it turns out basically every move here is a draw. But the simplest draw, if you see it, if you don't see it, it's not a draw, because I was calculating the rations here, and I felt like rook c2 should be winning for me. The only move is king to f5. Like if you consider g5, it's losing immediately, because knight h5, king goes to f5, and okay, actually every move is winning here. Then yeah, even just king takes. Yeah, okay. This is a simple variation. King g4 and knight e2, and I go to d3. I'm protecting the pawn and easily win. There was a more complicated line. King to g6. Yeah, king to g6, exactly. Here is the only move that is winning for white. Unfortunately, I saw it in my variations. That is knight f4. Sacrificing the knight, and this is a very instructive moment, because those 2 pawns seems like the king is gonna come and take all of them, but it doesn't work like that. If you go to f5, I just play h5, and you cannot take because this pawn is going to promote. If you go to the other direction, I play f5, and once again, you cannot take it. You also cannot go here because once you come there, even if we imagine there is no king here to help me, I still play h5, and we have the same situation. So you can never win those pawns with the king here. So that was the key knight f4 move. I'm not sure. My opponent calculated for so long time. Maybe he found that as well. But it turns out that you can just play king to f5, and then I play king to d3, and here you play the move g5, and this time it makes a draw. I thought that I have the move knight to g2, and then if you take and play king to g4, that is winning for white. So this is the variation I have calculated, because this time I'm in time with my king. King g2, king h3, king g5, I take the pawn, and then I promote my h-passer. But black has an amazing opportunity here. King g4 is losing, but king e5 is making a draw. Can you imagine that? The point is, it's a zugzwang. White has absolutely no move to make here. Like, if it would be black to move, that would be losing. But because it's white to move, I don't have any moves. If I go anywhere with my knight, then the king goes and stakes the pawn, and then we have enough moves as black to make a draw. And if the king goes, well, then just king goes forward, and whenever I go to the side, then the king once again comes and takes the last pawn. That's a draw. I mean, this is absolutely incredible. But I was lucky that my opponent didn't see it, and instead of that, he played g5. g5 is still objectively a draw, but it makes it 100 times more difficult for my opponent, because now he has to play this position for like another 200 moves, because I'm just protecting the pawn, and I have two pieces and a pawn, bishop and a knight and a pawn against the rook. Well, there is also this pawn, but it doesn't really matter that much as long as I'm able to protect it. But once again, objectively, the position is a draw. By the way, now we have 6 pieces on the board, which means that there is a table base that tells us for sure whether the position is winning or a draw. And this is exactly the case here. The position is draw up to a certain point. Here it's still a draw. Rook g8, rook f8 check. Yeah, I wanted to remaneuver my knight to f4, because on f2 it's pretty passive. On f4 it does exactly the same thing, protecting the bishop, but also it blocks the f file, so my king can go to f3, and then I can promote my pawn forward. And here is the key moment of the entire game, because the first time in the entire game I am winning after this move, rook to g8. Can you imagine that? I mean, it seems like a completely normal move. You want to stop that pawn, but it breaks one of the most important endgame principles. Never put your rook in front of the pawn. Always put it behind the pawn. Behind the pawn, the rook is very active. It can give a lot of checks. It can stop the pawn. But in front of the pawn, the rook is very clumsy. Never do that. So the right strategy would be to try to give a lot of checks, a lot of problems from the side, or just go into h8, not allowing me to go forward, and when I go forward, then to come from behind. But from this point of time, I'm winning, and I never allowed my opponents to get back to the draw territory. It's so surprising. Like, I didn't feel in the moment he played rook g8 that suddenly I'm winning. Nothing similar to that. I just felt that, okay, I have a practical chance to win this game. I don't know the objective evaluation, but I just know if I'm able to push the pawn forward, then I'm going to be able to make him sacrifice the rook, and then it's going to be bishop and knight, and thank God I know how to checkmate, and I'm going to show you later here. But this is so amazing. So I decided to wait one move here so that the rook is on f8 when I'm ready to go forward. I don't know, I felt somehow it's important for me. The engine doesn't care. It says that whether you play king g4 immediately with the rook on f7, whether you do it on f8, doesn't matter. The main thing is you go forward. But yeah, king to g5, and now I felt like I'm really making some progress. I'm pushing the king back here, I'm pushing my pawn forward. My opponent felt it was important for me to place the king on g7. Maybe he thought if he does that, then my pawn cannot go forward, but that's actually not true. So knight f4, rook d1, pawn goes forward, and now I felt like, yeah, I can just win this pawn and go back, or maybe create even more threats for my opponent. So I play knight to e6, pushing him back, g6, everything comes with a check. That's very nice. And At this point of time, my opponent was in time trouble. He had like 1 minute left. We have 30 seconds increment per move. So yes, of course I can take on d4, but then he plays rook g2 and he definitely sacrifices his rook. And I thought maybe I play knight e4 first because I'm not in a rush. I can always grab this pawn on d4. But if he makes a mistake here, for example, plays rook a5, then it felt that I'm already promoting my pawn. I play here king to f6, and you cannot take because of g7. If you go away, then I'm promoting the queen. Otherwise, I'm playing bishop c4 and win the rook. I wanted to trick him in some variations like that. Instead, he played the move rook to a1, knight d5, king to f6, and then after knight e7, I made another brilliant move, knight f5 here, sacrificing the bishop, because of course, if you take, I'm promoting the queen once again and give you a checkmate. So at this point, my opponent finally sacrificed the rook, and here we have it. Bishop and knight against the king. I have never had this position my entire chess career, and I was happy that this time, well, at least I know how to give a checkmate, and let me demonstrate it to you. So first of all, I decided, yes, I'm pretty confident that I know how to do that, but there is still this pawn. And remember, you get 50 moves to deliver a checkmate. But those 50 moves begin when the last piece is captured. So I'm not in no hurry to take this pawn. I can still make 1,000 moves here, walking around, and that's exactly what I did with my knight, just getting more time, because for every move I get 30 seconds. So I decided, yes, even though I know how to deliver a checkmate, it would be stupid not to get that additional time in case I need it, because if I'm not gonna checkmate my opponent, I'm gonna regret it for the rest of my life that I didn't get enough time to really think about it. So that's what I decided to do. Of course, you need to be careful here not to allow the 3 times repetition. That would be a draw. And finally here on move 100, I am taking the pawn on d4. That means starting from this point, I have 50 moves to deliver a checkmate. So the strategy to deliver a checkmate is very straightforward. First of all, you need to push the king backwards. Of course, ideally to the corner, and normally it goes to the wrong corner. I mean, if your opponent is smart, you have a light squares bishop, so the king goes to the dark squares. And then your task is to push the king all the way to the light corner, in this case, a light square here, where it's easy to deliver a checkmate. And there is a key double V maneuver from the knight, which is making all of that possible. So let me show you how exactly I delivered that. Bishop e4. So to push the king back, of course, we need to control as many squares as possible, and we need to use all 3 pieces. You can never checkmate using only 2 of those. All 3 should work together. King to a5, controlling so many squares over here. My opponent tries to stay here around their own corner, because he knows I cannot checkmate him there. But it's good for me, because I also control even more space. Here, bishop e6, bishop g4. Chess.com says it's a miss. Why? Because, well, I'm already able to push the king to the right corner and deliver a checkmate. But I know the pattern, how you deliver a checkmate from this side. Like, I'm playing white and I am going forward. So I decided it's going to be much simpler for me if I push him to this corner and then do it the way I know, instead of like looking from the sides, you know. I would need to stand up from the board and look at the board from the side to be able to have the same view as I know the right pattern to deliver a checkmate. So I decided to avoid all of those troubles. I still have enough moves. I just want to push him to the corner and then deliver the checkmate in a convenient way for me. So this is the starting position. You need to have all of your 3 pieces like that. Then you start pushing your king all the way from here to there. How do you do that? Well, you take all of the squares away from him, pushing him that way. And this W maneuver helps you a lot throughout this process. This is how it works. So first of all, knight f7, because we need to take this square away from the king. Then bishop goes to h7, because we need to take this g8 square from here. Goes to e8, then the knight goes back to e5, because we need to take the d7 square. So it's the key pattern. You always need to take as many squares from the king as possible. And there is one key idea to remember, because seemingly the king is escaping here. It goes to c7, then it has b6 square, and then it's out. We are not able to hold it anymore. And remember, we need it in the corner to checkmate. So you play knight to d7 here, continuing the maneuver. The knight always goes like that. You never need to do any other moves. That's the beauty of it. So it's important to remember, once you do, then you're going to find all of the right moves. And of course, the key idea here is when the king tries to escape, king to c6, then you just play bishop d3. And then it works like magic, all of the squares are under control, and the king has to go back. It was a little bit different in the game. My opponent played king to d6, but doesn't matter, because I still played the same thing, controlling those light squares, king to c4, bishop c4, my opponent has to go back, and then I play bishop d5, controlling all of those squares, b6 is under control, that pushes my king back. And then we have the same thing with those three pieces, but this time not on the f file, but on the d file. The pattern continues, so that's very good. Once you know it, everything else is easy. Bishop c4, bishop f7, controlling that e8 square, the king goes forward, then the knight continues its maneuver, knight to c5, because we need to control that square, and after king d8, we finish the w maneuver with knight to b7 check. Then the king is forced to have only these three squares at his disposal. Into b6, king should always be like one knight move away from the corner to be able to deliver a checkmate. King goes to a8. If it goes to c8, of course, just bishop e6 check, and it has to go back, so it doesn't make any difference. Into a8, bishop e6 anyway, and then knight goes to c5, king a8, waiting move, because you never want to spoil it. Knight a6 would be a stalemate, and I would be so devastated if I would have played it. But thank God I didn't do that. Bishop to f5, king to b8, knight a6, before checkmate. But this is very, very tough game. It was over like almost at 12 o'clock in the night. So this is quite a tough tournament. You start at 6 p.m. and then the full control you can play up to 12 o'clock. So very intense fight. I'm happy to win this game, and today is going to be round number 3. I'm gonna play against a strong Grandmaster, so the real battle begins for me. I still hope for your support, and here you can take a look at the round number 1. Play an extremely great game as black, and I share so many tips for you so that you can use it in your own games.